So today's video is going to focus on our second learning target, which is develop and evaluate a controlled experiment. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take out your green unit organizer, and then in slot 15 you're going to write controlled experiment notes. There's going to be no score for that. The next thing I need you to do is to find the page in your binder that looks like this. It says Controlled Experiment Notes at the top. And you're going to put a 15 in the upper right hand corner. Now, in a controlled experiment, variables, which are factors that might influence the results of an experiment, are recognized so only one thing is changed and tested at a time. If more than one variable is changed at a time, there's no way to determine what has made a difference. So we're going to connect all our learning today to a sample experiment. And the sample experiment that I've done is I want to know if talking to a plant encourages growth. So I have me and my handy dandy plant, and I'm wondering if I talk to it, will it grow faster? So a hypothesis is an educated guess used to lead an investigation. So data is collected to determine if the hypothesis can be backed by evidence. So we're going to see if it's true or not. So when I'm thinking about my experiment, about talking to a plant to see if it grows faster, I need to link it to something scientific. Now I know plants need carbon dioxide to grow, and I know that I breathe in oxygen and let out carbon dioxide. So if I talk to my plant, I'm putting more CO2 into it, so hopefully it'll grow better. So my hypothesis is that carbon dioxide is needed for plants to grow, and I exhale CO2, or carbon dioxide. So every investigation we're going to do has an investigation purpose question. And the purpose question states what will be changed and tested in the investigation. So our purpose question will be, will talking to plants improve their weekly height? So now we're going to talk about our variables. We have our independent variable, and that's the one variable that's changed and tested in the experiment. So for our investigation, talking to a plant to see if it makes it grow faster, how much I talk to the plant, whether it's going to be a little or a lot, is going to be our independent variable. It's what we as scientists are changing. So how much we're talking to the plants is our independent variable. Now our dependent variable are our measurements or observations collected. So our measurements or observations collected during the experiment to see how that variable responds to what is being changed and tested. So the dependent variable depends on the independent variable. And the independent variable does not depend on anything, which is why it's independent. So for our experiment, our dependent variable is the growth or height of the plant, because that's what we're measuring. So we're measuring how much height the plant gets depending on how much we talk to it, because we believe that carbon dioxide is needed for plants to grow, and I exhale carbon dioxide. Now, every other variable in this experiment has to be kept the same. We need to do this in order to ensure that only one thing is changed and tested at a time. So if we think about this hypothetical experiment, we need to use the same plant, same amount of food, amount of water, we also need to keep things like how close I am to the plant the same. So how close I am to the plant, etc. I'm sure there are a lot of other things you can think of that we should keep the same. Now, a control variable is that some experiments have a control that's a normal setup or result. So we want to make sure that normal is our key word when we think of a control. A control demonstrates a typical result when nothing is being changed in the experiment. Now, do people usually talk to plants? Maybe, but normally they don't. So for our control setup, we would say we would not talk to one plant. So we want to see how it grows normally. When we have a conclusion for an investigation, we need to refer back to the purpose question and identify the relationship found by the experiment. So for example, say my plants grew higher when I talked to them. So I would say, when I talk to plants, the plants grew taller than normal. This is the back side of the page. So we're going to learn how to graph these variables too. So our dependent variable, or what is measured and monitored in the experiment, that's going to go on the y-axis. This is our y-axis. Our independent variable goes on the x-axis, which is right here. So in this example, we have a distance versus time graph, time graph of two moving cars. The black line is car 1, and the red line is car 2. So how far the car goes, which is in distance, this is our dependent variable, the distance traveled. That depends on the time the cars travel, which is then our independent variable. In a lot of experiments we're going to do this semester, time will often be our independent variable because we're going to do things over time. One of the trickiest parts about doing controlled experiments is kind of identifying those variables. So in the first two problems, I'm going to guide you through it. So the directions say, identify the variables requested for each experiment described. Our first experiment is height of the bean plants are recorded daily for 2 weeks when a fertilizer is used. And it wants me to find my dependent variable, my independent variable, my constants, and my control setup. If I need to find the dependent variable, I need to ask myself, what am I measuring? What am I testing? So when I read it again, height of bean plants are recorded daily, I'm recording the height of the bean plants. I'm measuring that. I'm recording that. So that's going to be my dependent variable. So when I need to find my independent variable, I need to ask, what would affect the height of the plants? And it looks like the use of fertilizer. Now, some constant variables would be the amount of food, the type of plant, the amount of water. So what we're going to say, we're going to record daily, which is important, and the type of plant are being kept constant. So when we use a fertilizer on these bean plants, will it grow better? But what are we going to compare it to? What's going to be our normal setup? Well, our normal setup would be the use of a non-fertilized plant. For our second experiment, it says hamsters are kept at different temperatures for 6 weeks. Body fat percentage is recorded. Okay, so the first thing they're asking me for is my dependent variable. And when I need to find my dependent variable, I need to ask myself, what am I measuring? What am I recording? Well, in that last part of the sentence, it says body fat percentage is recorded. So I'm going to assume that my dependent variable, or what I'm measuring, is body fat percentage of hamsters. Now my independent variable is what's causing the dependent variable to change. And it says hamsters are kept at different temperatures. Well, it sounds like the different temperatures are what's being changed. So I'm going to assume that's my independent variable. So some constants in the experiments are that I'm using hamsters, and I'm assuming I'm using the same type of hamsters, and that the time span, 6 weeks, is going to be the same for every single hamster. Okay, so now I need to think about my control setup. What am I going to compare these hamsters tested at different temperatures against? So I'm going to assume that hamsters kept at a normal temperature are what I'm going to compare all my results to. The third one says weight is monitored weekly to determine how well a diet pill works. So after reading that, I kind of need to read into it a little bit more. And it says weight is monitored weekly. Monitored is a fancy way of saying recorded or measured. So weight is monitored gives us a hint that our dependent variable, what we're measuring or monitoring, is weight. Now, what causes the weight to change? What's our independent variable? What are we using to change the dependent variable? And that comes later in the sentence. So how well a diet pill works is going to be our independent variable. So the use of a diet pill is our independent variable. Some constants in this experiment really are truly the time span, so recording weekly, I'm assuming we're going to use the same people in the experiment. Our control setup, well, what are we going to compare the use of diet pills to? Well, we have to compare it to the use of not using diet pills. So not using diet pills. Before you come back to class tomorrow, I need you to try number 4 on your own. So you're going to do this by yourself. I really would strongly recommend doing it because that might show up as your warm-up question. Tomorrow in class we'll work on independent practice and then so then we're going to actually do an experiment where you get to see if you know your variables or not.